What happens when a movie actually makes it to theaters and still almost no one shows up? Not a flop? In 2025, dozens of films slipped into cinemas, blinked once, and vanished before most people even noticed. Some barely earned enough to pay for the posters. And here's the wild part. A few of these had reviews, festivals, even buzz. Stay with me, because what follows isn't about failure. It's about movies the system quietly left behind. Number 10. When Fall is Coming. 2025 was packed with noise, but this film arrived like a whisper and disappeared just as softly. When Fall is Coming is the kind of quiet drama that feels designed for discovery, yet it never found an audience willing to discover it. Released in a tiny number of theaters, the film opened without fanfare and closed before word of mouth could even form. It earned under $150,000, which is not just low, it is practically invisible in modern theatrical terms. The story itself is restrained and introspective, built around mood, silence, and emotional space rather than spectacle. That approach can work, but only when the right crowd knows where to look. Here, the marketing barely existed. No push, no urgency, no sense that this was something you had to see now or risk missing forever. And ironically, that is exactly what happened. Theaters rotated it out quickly to make room for louder titles. Streaming chatter never caught on. Review quotes stayed buried. When Fall is Coming became one of those films that technically released, but culturally never arrived. The impact is subtle, but sobering. This is what happens when a movie depends on patience in an industry that rewards speed. It did not fail loudly. It simply faded. Number 9. Kill the Jockey. On paper, Kill the Jockey looked like it had a path. Festival attention, critical curiosity, a premise that hinted at tension and character depth. But theaters told a different story. The film barely cracked $90,000 before disappearing from screens. That is not a stumble. That is a full stop. Part of the problem was timing. Released into a crowded calendar, the film had no room to breathe. Another issue was positioning. It was sold as something edgy and intense, yet arrived without the push that kind of tone requires. Audiences never knew what it was or why they should care. And when people do not understand a movie's identity, they rarely buy a ticket. What makes Kill the Jockey fascinating is how fast it vanished. One week it was listed, the next week it was gone. No controversy, no backlash, just silence. Theatrical failure does not always come with headlines. Sometimes it comes with a shrug. The impact here is less about the film itself and more about the system around it. Kill the Jockey did not collapse. It was never given the chance to stand. In 2025, that might be the most brutal outcome of all. Number 8. Orwell, 2+2=5. This was supposed to feel urgent. Instead, it felt invisible. Orwell, 2+2=5, arrived in 2025 with a title that sounded bold, provocative, and timely. But despite that built-in hook, the movie barely crossed $300,000 before slipping out of theaters. Not because audiences rejected it, but because most never saw it coming. The film leaned heavily on ideas, reflection, and modern parallels. That kind of material can work, but only when it's framed as essential viewing. Here, the rollout was restrained and quiet. There was no push to make it feel like an event. No sense that you needed to see it now, while it mattered. As a result, it drifted past theaters without urgency. Showtimes were limited. Screens were few. Conversations never ignited. And once momentum failed to spark, theaters moved on quickly. In a crowded release calendar, subtlety can be fatal. The impact is revealing. Even a recognizable name can mean nothing if the release strategy doesn't demand attention. Orwell 2+. 2=5 didn't collapse under criticism. It dissolved under indifference. And in a year where attention was the most valuable currency, that quiet fade sealed its box office fate. Number 7. Guns and Moses. This film arrived with a clear message and a specific audience in mind, but theaters did not respond. Guns and Moses earned just over $70,000 before disappearing. That number suggests more than low interest. It suggests near total absence. The rollout was minimal. The marketing was narrow. And the film struggled to communicate why it mattered beyond its core theme. In a year packed with bigger titles and louder campaigns, This one simply could not compete for attention. What stands out is how quickly it left. No expansion, no second chance. Theaters moved on almost immediately. For many potential viewers, it never existed. That is the quiet reality of limited releases in 2025. If you do not hit instantly, you vanish. The impact here is not about quality, it is about reach. Guns N' Moses became another example of how films with specific viewpoints can struggle theatrically when distribution fails to meet ambition. It did not spark debate. It did not spark conversation. It slipped through the cracks. Number 6. Tatami. Tatami might be the most critically respected title on this list, which makes its box office result feel especially harsh. Under $80,000. That is all it earned in theaters. And yet, this is a film that critics discussed with seriousness and care. The problem was never reception. It was exposure. Tatami received a restrained release that felt almost symbolic. A few screens, a short window, no time to build momentum. Audiences that might have connected with it simply never crossed paths with it. This is the danger zone for modern cinema. Films that are too thoughtful for mass marketing, yet too quiet to force their way into conversation. Tatami did not collapse under criticism. It dissolved under indifference. The impact is a reminder that theatrical success is not always tied to quality. Sometimes it is tied to timing, visibility, and luck. Tatami will likely find appreciation later through streaming and discussion. But in theaters, it barely left a footprint. And that makes it one of 2025's most telling box office disappearances. Number 5. The Ballad of Wallace Island. Some movies don't crash. They drift. The Ballad of Wallace Island is one of those films. Released quietly in 2025, it earned under $100,000 before theaters let it go. That number isn't just low, it's symbolic. It tells you exactly how little space this film was given to exist. This was a character-driven story built on atmosphere, eccentric moments, and slow emotional turns. It wasn't designed to shout, but the problem is nobody whispered about it either. There was no clear push, no reason for casual audiences to pick it over something louder and easier. Without urgency, curiosity fades fast. Theaters rotated it out almost immediately. Online chatter stayed minimal. Even people who would normally seek out offbeat indie films didn't know where or when it was playing. Wallace Island became one of those titles you discover later and ask a painful question. How did I miss this? Its impact isn't measured in money. It's measured in absence. This is what happens when a film relies on discovery in a system that no longer waits to discover anything. It didn't offend. It didn't excite. It simply disappeared. Number 4. The Librarians. The Librarians sounds like a movie people would stumble upon and recommend. Instead, it became one of 2025's quietest theatrical disappearances. With a box office total hovering around $200,000, the film slipped in and out of theaters without ever announcing itself. This was a small, character-focused story that relied on charm and tone rather than spectacle. But charm needs visibility, and visibility never arrived. Marketing was minimal. Trailers barely circulated. Listings appeared briefly and then vanished. If you weren't actively searching for it, you likely never knew it was playing. What makes this one sting is how easily it could have survived with the right push. It wasn't inaccessible. It wasn't confusing. It simply wasn't positioned as something worth prioritizing in a busy movie-going week. Without urgency, curiosity fades fast. Theaters gave it little time to grow. Word of mouth never had a chance to form. And just like that, it was gone. The impact is clear. In 2025, movies that depend on quiet discovery are fighting an uphill battle. The Librarians didn't fail because audiences disliked it. It failed because the system never gave audiences a reason to notice it. Number 3. Judo. Re-releases usually rely on nostalgia or rediscovery. Judo had neither working in its favor. In 2025, this classic return earned barely $14,000. That's not a revival. That's a footnote. The issue wasn't quality. Judo has history, reputation, and cinematic weight. But modern theatrical audiences didn't connect with the re-release strategy. Limited screens, minimal promotion, No clear reason why this moment mattered now. Most people didn't even realize it was playing. Others assumed it would be available digitally soon and skipped theaters entirely. The result was a release that technically happened, but culturally didn't register. The impact is telling. Re-releases are no longer automatic events. Without context or urgency, they fade faster than new films. Judo didn't fail because audiences rejected it. It failed because the industry forgot to reintroduce it properly. Number 2. The Ice Tower. The Ice Tower is one of those rare cases where the box office number feels unreal. Around $8,000. That is not an estimate or an exaggeration. That is the entire theatrical story. At that level, the conversation changes completely. This wasn't a traditional flop where audiences rejected the movie. This was something colder and stranger, a technical release, a box checked, a requirement fulfilled. Most theaters never played it. Most viewers never heard of it. And even people who actively search for obscure, hard-to-find films likely missed it entirely. There was no build-up, no sense of arrival, no moment where curiosity had time to form. The film appeared quietly on a handful of listings and vanished before anyone could ask questions. There was no controversy to spark interest, no debate to keep it alive, no word of mouth to save it, just silence. And silence in this industry is not neutral, it is fatal. When nothing surrounds a movie, it doesn't linger. It evaporates. The impact is stark and unsettling. When a film earns less than what some people make selling old furniture over a weekend, it forces uncomfortable questions. Why was this released theatrically at all? Who was it for? What chance did it really have? The Ice Tower stands as one of 2025's clearest examples of a movie that was lost before it even arrived. Not ignored, not rejected, simply unseen. Number 1. It was just an accident. This is the bottom. It was just an accident earned under $70,000, placing it among the absolute lowest theatrical totals of the year. And the irony is hard to miss. With a title like that, you might expect bad luck, timing, or chance to be the culprit. But nothing about this outcome feels accidental. This was a disappearance planned by neglect. The release arrived quietly, almost apologetically. There was no sense of arrival, no signal to audiences that this movie mattered or even existed. Marketing was nearly invisible. Trailers were scarce. Listings were easy to miss. Theaters gave it minimal showtimes and even less patience. Within days, it was gone. For most people, the film never existed beyond a name that briefly flickered on a schedule and then vanished. What makes this the number 1 entry is how cleanly it captures the theme of this list. This was not a movie that failed to meet expectations. Expectations were never created. It didn't lose an audience. It never found one. Visibility was absent. Access was limited. Presence was non-existent. The impact is chilling. In 2025, a film can be written, filmed, edited, and released, yet still leave no cultural trace at all. It was just an accident, didn't miss its moment. Its moment never arrived. And that makes it the most complete box office failure of the year. So the next time someone says every movie gets its moment, remember this list. In 2025, some films didn't just struggle. They vanished, no buzz, no backlash, just empty seats and forgotten listings. Now I want to hear from you. Which one surprised you the most, or which film do you think deserved better? Drop it in the comments, hit subscribe for more deep dives like this, and share this with someone who loves uncovering what the spotlight missed. Because sometimes silence tells the loudest story.